I don't believe that anybody feels the way I do about you now. And all the roads we have to walk are winding, and all the lights that lead us there are blinding. And there are many things that I would like to say to you, but I don't know how. But maybe you're gonna be the one that saves me. And after all, you're my wonderwall.
All right, everybody, happy Tuesday. Welcome back to Morning Coffee with Rick Alexander. The intro music provided by Brittany Taylor. She's at Barbell Brittany on Instagram, and I am at Rick Alexander _ on Instagram and at Lionheart Radio. All right, so we are continuing our themed week for Morning Coffee, and this is how you take care of yourself. And so I've sort of done a lot of thinking about what it really means to take care of yourself and to prioritize yourself, and what we require, not just from a physical perspective, but from a psychological and an emotional perspective. Like how do we take care of ourselves so that we're showing up in the world fit for service and ready to be the absolute best version of ourselves that we can be? Because, like I said in yesterday's episode, we spend a lot of our lives in reactive mode. And so what I've really spent a lot of time doing over the last 6 months is trying to figure out what it means to take care of myself so that I'm not in such reactive mode, so that I don't have anxiety through the roof, so that I don't always feel like I'm trying to catch up. Like I actually feel like I'm getting ahead, like I'm working on projects that excite me, and I'm hanging out with people that excite me, and I'm not spending my life out of obligation. And one thing I will recognize is some of these concepts in this week's themes, they're not that novel, and they're not like that new. But sometimes we don't think about them in the right way. That's at least what I've found. Like sometimes we get advice that's so overgiven that it almost becomes, it just becomes white noise, and we don't necessarily grasp the concept of it. And so with these short episodes, hopefully it gives you something to sort of think about the role that these things are playing in your own life today. Now, for today's show, we're going to talk about a concept that gets talked a lot in the maybe self-improvement space, and that is delaying gratification. And the reason I'm going to bring it up though, is because what I've realized is when we delay gratification, not only are we typically like reserving ourselves for a bigger future or a bigger goal, but when we don't delay gratification, what we end up doing is we end up trading what we want now for what we could have in the future. And that's a problem, because the future, once we get to the future, we're going to say, why the fuck did I trade that for that moment, right? That's what a hangover is, right? Like if I choose not to drink today, the future I could have is a productive, energetic one. But when I choose to take what I want right now, it could be that leaves me feeling like shit tomorrow. And so that is a problem with all of the sort of impulsive decisions that we make. So typically, if there's an ability or a way to delay gratification, then in most cases, that will be the opportunity to take care of yourself best with that current decision that you make. Now, not always. There are some times where you have to like prioritize, like what do I want right now? Like what's going to make me happy? And that's completely okay. But what you don't want to do is you don't want to trade a indulgent present for a really satisfactory future. And that's what I think the real problem is. One of the questions I asked in an earlier show is that I ask myself all the time is, am I just the sum of my urges? And the answer's got to be no. You cannot be the sum of your urges, because if you act on every impulse and every urge and everything, then what happens is, in effect, you trade your future for your present. And that can be a real issue when it comes to satisfaction and happiness. Another way to think about delayed gratification is, how am I acting on serotonin instead of dopamine? So for those of you that don't know, and I'm going to do a whole episode on this this week actually about servitude, but when it comes to dopamine is released, and it's associated with momentary gratification and happiness. Now, the problem with dopamine is that it goes away quickly, and then it leaves you wanting more. So dopamine is released in major volumes with a lot of addictive drugs like cocaine. And that's what one of the things that makes them so dangerous. You know, I heard a psychologist one time say when they were studying the effects of cocaine on the brain and the way that it releases this flood of dopamine and how that dopamine just wants you to make more of it, essentially, or to go back after that thing that caused it to release because it is so quick acting and it is so quick leaving. He said the question is not why do some people do cocaine sometimes. The question is why doesn't everybody do cocaine all the time? And it's kind of a funny way to phrase it, but the interesting thing is it's because, you know, they're acting on that dopamine. The reason we don't all do it all the time is because we're not willing to trade a really successful future in most cases for what could be like an exciting or happy right now. You know, serotonin is the thing that's linked to long-term happiness. So when serotonin is released, and you get a release from serotonin when you do something good for somebody else per se, that's what's associated with satisfaction. Now, when you think about in terms of delaying gratifications, because I'm going to talk about those two things, how they interact in terms of servitude later in the week. But when we talk about how they manifest in our lives right now, every time you turn on Instagram and somebody gives you a like, you get a release of dopamine. And so then you just want more. And so that's why you end up going back to your phone constantly, because you're looking for that dopamine, because it's all happening subconsciously for the most part. You don't even understand it until you realize you like sit there and you're like, why have I just been scrolling for so damn long? That's why, because your body is after that dopamine release. And so in a lot of ways, that can be another way to think about delaying gratification. How can I avoid activities, gambling, drinking, cocaine use, social media? How can I put these in a position in my life so that they're not running my life? Because if they are running your life, what you find is you're not even happy in the moment. See, because that dopamine release, and a lot of times is so quick and it's gone so fast that you just acted on an impulse, but it didn't even have the effect of happiness that you actually thought it was going to have. So when it comes to taking care of yourself, you have to act in your future's best interest. You have to act in the interest of who you could be in the future. And when you think about yourself in the future, you have to look at it in a way that allows you to make the best decisions now. So in a lot of ways, that is delaying gratification. And so I think about every day in terms of what I'm doing, am I acting on or am I delaying gratification? And is that justified? And, you know, here's the thing. A lot of times when it comes to taking care of yourself, it's just simply drawing attention to areas. That's all it is. Because once you draw attention to it, you're no longer acting subconsciously. Then you get put in the driver's seat. And then you have a better opportunity to make the decision that's going to be best for you at the time. And so when I talk about delaying gratification, when I talk about you thinking today, what do you have going on today? Like, what are you going to do? What are you going to do when you get off of work? What are you going to do in your free time? Like, those are the things that just drawing attention to, it might allow you to, you know, perhaps make better decisions with the time that you do have. And when it comes to long-term care, that's going to be extremely beneficial. At least that's what I found in my own life. I'll talk to you guys tomorrow on Morning Coffee.